Hello everyone and welcome to this talk. My name is Sadeghi. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Tübingen and a member of Neurocognitive Modeling Group. Competent social behavior depends on how well we understand others' actions, thoughts, and feelings. Gestalt perception is one of the hallmarks of our perceptual cognitive apparatus, which heavily relies on properly binding visual features, suitably adapting the matching perspective, and mapping the bound features onto the correct Gestalt templates. The mirror neuron system, which associates perceived visual information with the own sensory motor system, plays a fundamental role. And the underlying mechanisms to learn such associations includes a visual system that has to integrate distinct visual features into Gestalt perceptions. Being inspired by the aforementioned concepts, we propose a generative artificial neural network architecture in order to improve the behavior of intelligent agents. The involved binding or correspondence problem addresses the question whether what establishes the correspondence between observation of others and self-representations. In other words, how we integrate visual features into an overall whole, that is a Gestalt. Besides Gestalt perception, perspective taking, and behavior interpretation abilities are needed. And the main question here would be, what is a possible computational perspective for explaining model representation of actions? In this regard, the perspective taking problem arises when we need to infer an action that we observe from an unknown viewpoint by utilizing information that we derive from our self-perspectual experiences. During this process, respective neural codes are continuously attempting to match sensory input with top-down expectations. Another motivation would be to figure out how well population coding can contribute and what are the required information channels. For this purpose, and in our model, after extracting relevant submodal information and projecting them onto a particular visual frame of reference, we encode each submodality separately by one population of topological neurons with Gaussian tunings. The individual neuron centers in each submodal population are evenly distributed in the anticipated range of the stimulus in accordance to its dimension, range, and configuration of the perceived submodal stimuli. Such encodings can be closely related to encodings found in the visual cortex and beyond. However, to assess the effectiveness of population coding, we additionally evaluate the model's performance on the raw submodal information. Moreover, and in order to enable the imagination of temporal dynamics and the inference of the type of the observed behavior, our architecture adds a recurrent behavioral module. Taken together, we introduce a generative recurrent neural network model which solves the binding, perspective taking, and behavior interpretation problems simultaneously by means of gradient-based inference. Moreover, when the input stimulus is not entirely present, the model is still able to produce bias imagination and to perform Gestalt perception. Here you see the proposed architecture in a connectivity graph, which consists of the processing cascade from ith visual input to jth visual bodily feature, a variational autoencoder, and a recurrent neural network-based temporal predictive processing module. At the end, the aim of training is to first learn action patterns of submodal perceptions in generative and compressed formats. Second, learn spatiotemporal imagination of the action embeddings and submodal compressed codes. And third, generate embodied submodal expectations for tackling the perspective taking and feature binding challenges, while in the meantime interpreting the actual observed behavior. The binding problem concerns the selection and integration of separate visual features and the correct combination. An approach for solving this problem is to selectively route respective feature positions and motion dynamics such that the rerouted feature patterns match the expected Gestalt dynamics. Both the selection of features relevant for the recognition of biological motion and the assignment to the respective neural processing pathways are handled by an adaptive gated connectivity matrix, which routes observed features to bodily features. As a consequence, when a fully trained autoencoder is provided with an imperfect stimulus, for example, it observes an action with unknown identity of features shown from an unknown perspective, it will tend to infer the closest known stimulus pattern, which will correspond to its embodied or self-perspectual experience. During training, the assignment biases are initialized in a way that all diagonal elements are set to 1 and other elements are set to 0. And that's because the assignment is fixed during simulated self-observations. During testing, which is the case here, all assignment biases are initialized to -1. And after passing through a logistic function, this will lead to a value of almost 0.26 for all elements in the binding matrix, which is the case here at time step 0. This will result in an initial subtle mixture of all possible assignments, and all values in the binding matrix are adapted over time by means of gradient-based inference. We denote the respective losses of posture, direction, and magnitude by delta P, delta D, and delta M. Afterwards, we scale the loss signals by respective factors, beta P, beta D, and beta M. We do this in order to balance the error signal influences. Here in the left, we see the development of selection and integration of separate visual features in the correct combination. The variational autoencoders thus generate posture, direction, and motion magnitude predictions. After model learning, the differences between the Gestaltian input and the reconstructed and regenerated Gestaltian output for posture, direction, and magnitude is to be minimized by adapting the parametric bias neurons activities of the binding matrix. In the middle here, we see the feature binding error, which measures the sum of Euclidean distances between the true assignment and the actual model's assignment of a bodily feature. On the right, we see the assignment progress over time, starting with a very low initial assignment strength for all elements in the matrix and being adapted over time by the top-down prediction error that originates from the variational autoencoder helps the network to assign input features to its corrected body feature. In this example, the model perceives the data from an unknown viewpoint like this one here and needs to transfer it to its known egocentric frame of reference. We employ the respective losses for posture, motion direction, but not motion magnitude, since magnitude is invariant to perspective taking by nature. Subsequently, we backpropagate the respective prediction errors farther back onto perspective taking neurons, which rotate and translate the input features onto a known frame of reference. A temporal predictive processing module of the autoencoder-based compressed stimuli enables the imagination of temporal dynamics and the inference of the type of the unfolding behavior. The behavior module consists of an LSTM followed by a linear layer. This module is able to both infer the current behavior that is being observed and imagine the temporal behavioral dynamics when the bottom-up input is missing. As you can see, in the end, the model correctly infers the action types. Thank you for listening, and we will be happy to answer any further questions.